Hello, this is Sam Gerrans from truthinthenews.info. Today is Saturday, the 23rd of April, 2022, and I'm going to look at another article and dissect it on the basis of my 8 things, or kind of propaganda, sort of icons. But I've got a couple of things to say first. Obviously, a lot of people in the comments don't really understand what I'm doing. They think I'm just sort of, I don't know, shilling for Putin or whatever it is. I mean, you really ought to watch a whole one through to the end to understand what I'm doing. You can apply this to everything. My actual point is to, seeing as you live in the new Soviet Union, I mean, you have a surveillance state. You can't state your own opinion. Truth changes every 5 minutes. You're directed in terms of gush and outrage to whatever object is dangled before you. I mean, can you not see that you are actually living now in a sort of updated version of the Soviet Union? Now, all I'm really trying to do in this channel, I mean, of course, I concentrate on what's current, and what's current is the operations in Ukraine, and I'm placing that in a broader context. And of course, I have a view on this, but you can apply this to everything. I'm really trying to, rather than kind of give you a fish, I'm trying to teach you how to fish. And the whole point of it is, seeing as you live now in the Soviet Union, perhaps we all do to some extent. I don't even know. I'm not saying, there are any goodies in this side, in this battle. I don't really see it in those terms. But just to say that, seeing as, in the West, you are now living in a kind of I suppose, sort of, it's like a neon light version of the Soviet Union. All I'm trying to do is help you learn what every Soviet citizen with any kind of education understood throughout the whole period, that there is this is what the channel is named after. There were two main newspapers, Pravda, which means truth, and Izvestia, which means news. And the joke was, there's no truth in the news, and there's no news in the truth. That's what I'm trying to teach you. Because what's different, what I notice about the difference between the old Soviet Union and the new Soviet Union, is that in the old Soviet Union, everybody understood that it's all nonsense. And at work, they were all, in favor of whatever lunatic thing. I mean, it wasn't as mad as what you have in the West. It wasn't as insane as, if you feel that you're a woman, even though you're a man, you can be a woman, or whatever. But there was their own form of insanity. What was that quote I heard yesterday? I came across yesterday. Whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. Isn't that fitting? Anyways, but in that form of insanity, which is really collectivism and people all not thinking for themselves and all the rest of it, even under that system, people at home understood that it was nonsense, and you would have since open and frank conversations based in reality at home. This is the difference in the West. You don't have, I think it's beginning, those kind of like clandestine kitchen conversations. I think that at last they're beginning, but there's a corollary to that, which is laughing at the propaganda. This is what I'm trying to get over to you. So that's the first thing. I know a lot of people get this. Quite a lot of people understand this, but there's, I don't know, all the types of people. I limit myself. I mean, I do kind of check now once a day, just quickly, have a quick look at the comments and stuff. But really, this isn't even interesting to me. So I'm just doing it because it has to be done. So that's the first thing. The second thing was, I had some comments, constructive, I think, and well-meaning, about how I could perfect this channel to make it more sort of, I don't know, pleb friendly or something. And I agree, they were probably right. I probably could, sort of wave my hands. I mean, they weren't saying this, but the kind of waving your hands around and action and all of this to appeal to people with no attention span. I'm not really interested in those people, and I have to make this slightly interesting to myself. Otherwise, I couldn't do it. It's so tedious, as I suspect it is for you as well. So anyway, let's just bite the bullet and get on with it. And let's play another game, another round of the world's most boring game, which is propaganda bingo. So let's just jump straight into it. Today, I'm going to look at the Politico. That's the name of this paper. I've never read it before. What I was interested in was sanctions, because I want to kind of hit this topic. And I don't know what view the Politico takes. I don't know if it's so-called left or so-called right. Okay. Brussels is drawing up plans for a 6th package of sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Well, I mean, obviously this is missing context. We know that. It's really, and it's obfuscation because, I mean, really, you need to know what the background to all of this is, but they're pretending to be journalists, and it's gaslighting as well. But let's just kind of, I know people don't like me using these too much, but I'll just kind of get through it as quickly as I can. With measures expected to be presented to European Union countries early next week, according to several diplomats. I don't know if these diplomats have been named, but, everyone's too stupid. They don't need a source. The new package is set to include some form of ban on Russian oil imports. Well, that'd be a good idea. I mean, your economy's crashing. I mean, just to put this into some sort of context, I do watch and I do appreciate some of these analysts. I don't think I need to name them. I'm sure a lot of people watch them as well. I think they're very good. However, they seem unable to grasp because they are analysts, they are very good at dealing with inside their specialist subject, but they can't seem to grasp the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is this, that the West has been systematically destroyed over the last basically 100 years. I mean, I've lived through half of those 100 years, so I've seen it. Nothing I've ever seen that's happened in the West over the last 100 years has been good. Pretty much nothing. It's all been geared toward destroying it systematically and culturally and in every single way. So why would this be any different? And what we see is a sort of conspiracy, what I call the greed and stupidity conspiracy, which somehow the ruling elites, what they call the political class, suffer from this sort of syndrome where they're unable to see the blindingly obvious and are colluding together in their own through stupidity and greed in their own demise. Well, I don't agree that this is the case. And we have, it may be the case in a local sense, but it's certainly not the case overall, because overall they've told you. They told you. Klaus Schwab came out and told you. He said, he said this is going to be what's coming is the Great Reset. Well, what do you think this is? I mean, we went straight from COVID seamlessly into this. You're telling me that this wasn't part of the plan? I think people are woefully naive, and unfortunately, this whole really important elephant in the room is missing from a lot of the conversation around this. I understand why that happens. That happens because people who are very good analysts are by nature cautious. They have to be, because it goes with their profession. I don't care. I just say it as I call it, as I see it. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, but I've been right, pretty consistently over the last few years. So I'm going to sort of stick to my instincts. That's the way I see it. You may disagree. Conspiracy theorist. Oh yes, hold on. Shaming language and insults.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
Let's get back to this. The new package is set to include some form of ban on Russian oil imports and may also target more Russian banks by expelling them from the SWIFT international payment system, 4 diplomats told Politico. Where are these diplomats? Unnamed sources thus far. Maybe that will change. We'll see. Because I haven't read this before. I don't read them anymore. There's no point. As the Ukraine war drags on. Yeah, well, let's just talk about that. Drags on. Drags on thanks to whom? Drags on thanks to... firstly, I can't speak to this article yet because I haven't read it, but certainly what I've been reading recently from The Guardian in italics and The Independent in italics, it's thanks to them. I mean, those sort of journalist prostitutes who work for these particular outlets, I would like to see them personally up on charges in a tribunal for prolonging crimes against humanity in the form of this war, which really should never have happened. It only happens if you listen to people like Scott Ritter or Colonel Doug McGregor, both of whom are military experts. They will tell you that this is only because of the belligerence of the West, or if you don't like them, John Mearsheimer, who is a Harvard academic. I think he's Harvard. He's certainly no Putin fanboy or anything like that, but they will tell you the actual backstory. So yeah, it's true that this has been dragging on, but it seems that the West is quite happy to fight this war to the last drop of Ukrainian blood, and now it's quite obvious that really what it is it's another scam, isn't it? A bit like the pharmaceutical companies, where now they just pour all this money into Ukraine, which is basically, I suppose, a money laundering exercise, and there'll be kickbacks to all the people putting the money in. So it's just another way of robbing you lot as your economies are being taken down. You see, you will own nothing and you will be happy. I don't know where the happy bit comes in, but, we haven't seen that yet. So we'll stick with the owning nothing for now. In the 5 previous packages, the EU has backed a ban on coal and removed a number of Russian banks from SWIFT in an effort to ratchet up economic pressure on Moscow. But as evidence emerges of atrocities reportedly committed by Russian forces, yeah, well, they are reportedly by who? Reportedly by the Ukrainians, who are reliably unreliable. So let's consider the source. If you listen to the very good analysts at the Duran, they agree with. Well, we are in agreement that the official Russian presentation has proven itself to be reliable over these months, whereas the Ukrainian sources have been proven themselves to be totally unreliable. In fact, that's the only kind of reliable thing you can say about them, is that they're totally unreliable. And my view, again, this is not something which kind of comes through to a more analytical presentation, but I would say is more to do with inference logic, is that the reason, apart from many humanitarian considerations, obviously it's the fact that the Russians and the Ukrainians are Slavic brothers, there's that. But from the very first day, I've said that the Russians are playing a long game. They are not just fighting this war, and this is the first TikTok war that's ever happened. And the Russians have left the whole of that, the telephone system in place, even though it seems to work against them. But I think in the long term, what they're doing is collecting evidence and letting other people collect evidence. They'll be squirreling it all away and labeling it, time stamping it, geolocation stamping it, and all the rest, because they're putting a case together against, well, you basically. The bleeding art liberals in the West are, and their representatives in the first instance, and the journalists, I do hope, are going to be up in the new Nuremberg trials. This is what the Russians are working towards. This isn't just a war. They're not just fighting, in my view, the last war of World War II, the last battle of World War II. They're also defeating NATO. This is what's really happening. Certainly there's a shift from the unipolar to the multipolar world. That's happening as well, from rules-based to law-based international legal systems, etc. I'm not saying these things are necessarily good or bad. I'm not here to judge those exactly. What I'm saying, though, is that Russia is playing this longer game. And that's why one of the reasons why I put a lot of faith in what they say, because I just have a memory. And so if you watch over the course of a couple of weeks, you'll say, oh yeah, well that's been borne out by the facts. Does it mean that everything that comes out of a Russian's telephone is reliable? No, of course not. But the statements by the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and these sort of legal, formal departments are, in the vast majority of cases, either are completely correct or very close to correct. And when they seem to be, if there's something which doesn't really work in the Russians' favor, what they tend to do is elide it. They just don't mention it. So that's been my experience. So, what this presents here as evidence emerges of atrocities reportedly committed by Russian forces in Ukraine. I'm just saying there is no evidence for this. And also the Russians have no reason to do it. They're going to go to court with this. Now, does it mean that occasional Russian doesn't do a bad thing? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is the policy of the Russian government is what it is. And it understands. Think of it for yourself, right? If you had a business partner and this business partner had shown himself to be completely in bad faith in all his dealings, and you knew that you had to collect evidence against that business partner because you're going to then take that evidence to a court of law, would you then, in that process, lie and deceive when you know that in downstream you're going to take him to court and have to present all of that evidence? I would say that wouldn't be in your interest. That's the only point I'm really making. I'm not saying Russians are, genetically more truthful than Ukrainians or anything. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that this isn't in the Russians' interests to do what any of the things that the West is accusing Russia of doing. That's what I'm saying. Anyway. As evidence emerges, well, what evidence? I mean, it's all been pretty much debunked, of atrocities, reportedly, that's an important word, reportedly, committed by Russian forces in Ukraine. Western governments have stepped up military support for Kyiv, as you have to call it. Everyone's calling it Kyiv. Have you noticed about libtards? They can't remember what things were called yesterday. I mean, when we were destroying Argentinians in the Falklands, it became the Argentine. It had been called Argentina up until the very week that broke out. But you have to sort of rename everything, and people just get with the new program. They don't miss a beat. They don't even notice. Look what's happened to the word gay in the last 40 years. Tell me that we're not living through a business plan anyway. Where are we? Yeah, to intensify sanctions against President Vladimir Putin and his regime. I'm going to allow myself, I know nobody likes this, but yes, the regime of Vladimir Putin. So it's, I mean, everywhere it has a regime. And anyway, I just wanted to hit this point because I was thinking about this last night. The West, at least they're selling you this idea. I think this is a plan to take down the West. Okay, I'm sure you'll find analysts who won't or can't see that, but for me it's self-evident. But that's just me. But it's this mythology which attaches to the sanctions. There's a couple of things about this. Number one, I mean, I live in Russia, in case you don't know, and I speak Russian and I'm married to a Russian and blah blah blah. But what I've noticed here is since February 24th is that Russia has fundamentally changed. But not in the way you'll be told. It's fundamentally changed. I'll tell you what's changed here is that prior to that point, I mean, Putin was pretty popular, I would say, but the mood swing in favor of Putin and the regime has been. You can taste it, and this is nothing to do with. It's nothing to do with kind of war jingoism or anything like that, because I've met nobody who hates Ukrainians since I've lived here, and that's 20 years in total. Doesn't happen. I know the Ukrainians hate Russians, but it's not a two-way street. Russians don't feel that way about Ukrainians. But what's happened, which is completely different, is that I think I can't speak for all Russians, and then of course you'll find Russians who disagree, but I'm talking about the preponderance, the generality, is the complete siding with the government, with Putin, and etc. And I'll tell you why. We have a memory in this country. We remember what the European powers did. Let's just take, for example, Yugoslavia, what they did to Milosevic. I mean, clearly he was done away with in a cell in the Hague. And obviously, his country destroyed and all the rest of it, completely against the remit of NATO. Now, you think that Putin doesn't know that? You think that Lavrov doesn't remember that? You think that these really, really, really bright, I'm not talking about Liz Truss and these, over-promoted morons. I'm talking about people who really know history. You think they can't remember that? They know precisely what's coming to them individually, because the West, this isn't a matter of sort of, I don't know, 17th century, 16th century, where the defeated general would surrender his sword and then they'd go off together and drink tea. No, that doesn't happen anymore. They come after you and your family and destroy everything. I mean, this is Old Testament type of stuff. That's how they operate. This is how these hissy fit throwing Westerners operate. They come after you forever until you're all and then they come after your children as well. So you think that they don't know that in this country, that the leadership in this country doesn't know that, and that they have no out. There's nowhere for them to go. They can't, take their, as it were, if you say that this is true, ill-gotten gains and go and live in Miami or somewhere, like Zelensky's planning to do if he lives that long, or the south of France or something, or Switzerland. No, they have no out, because they all know that the West will never stop until either one or the other side is basically won. They know this, and they're correct. And so does everyone else in this country. So what we have is what I would call like общая судьба. It's like we have a common fate. The people know that the government is has no option but to stay and fight and to do the very best they can for the country, because there's the alternative to that is, being Milosevic'd. And I think everybody here, well, not everybody, but a lot of people here understand that, and it shows. So these sanctions and this hissy fit throwing by the West, what I would argue is actually designed to destroy the West. But let's leave that to one side. What it's done is, what it's helped to contribute to is the forging of a nation in a way that just didn't exist previously, up until the 24th of February. What you've seen here is a kind of splotczoność, I don't know, like a consolidation between the people and the government that I've never experienced in my life. So that's one part of it. Certainly there were some hardships, but we have Telegram. We see what's happening in the West, and Russians are going, you know what? I think we'll stay here. Also, Russians who left in a little bit in all of that hysteria. Apparently, some of them are coming back. I don't know, but that's what I hear is happening. So there's that, but there's another facet of this which I find quite interesting, is that, so let's take for example the Chechens and other fighters in Ukraine. The Chechens are very impressive fighters, but what's happened is that from in the Russian Federation has been forged, in the sort of metallurgic sense of that word, one country. You can taste it. Anyway, I'm not presenting this to you as sort of like an analyst. I'm giving you my impression of what's going on. So in a way, these sanctions, their stated aim is to undermine Russia. That's their stated aim. That's their sort of propaganda, kind of customer-facing packaging. But what's actually happened, and let's assume there are some more intelligent people who are actually at the top of this, is that they've managed to create a country, a nation where it didn't exist to this extent previously. And I have to assume that that's the purpose. But you can taste it. And the other thing, of course, is to go with all of the oligarchs. I mean, Russia has had all of its problems pretty much solved by the West. It had an oligarch problem, who were the carpetbaggers under Yeltsin. Putin couldn't get rid of them. I mean, he distanced himself from them, and he gave them bounds within which they could work. The West has solved that problem for him completely. Putin wanted to kind of divorce from the West. But if he had done that himself, a lot of people, especially in the so-called intelligentsia and certain portions of quite vocal and influential, especially culturally, but also economically, parts of the country here would have really resented that. Well, they've forced his hand. They've solved that problem for him. The ruble has basically now sort of unhitched itself from the world economic system and is now, at least for the time being, correlated with gold. Thank you very much. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better set of actions at the same time. At the same time, the West is basically committing economic and cultural suicide. I mean, who Putin doesn't have to do anything. You're just committing harikari, like right there, whilst screaming and shouting. Anyway, I mean, events may change. I may be shown to be wrong, but certainly at this point, this is how it looks to me. So anyway, just carry on. Regime, where do we stop? Large Russian banks, such as Gazprombank and Sberbank, have so far been excluded from the sanctions. Well, that's not true, because I have an account with Sberbank, and I don't believe you can transfer to SWIFT with them, as they are involved in energy transactions. But European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen told German newspaper Bild on Sunday that the new sanctions will likely hit Sberbank, Russia's largest bank. Yeah, it's Russia's largest bank. It's Russia's internal bank, mainly. It's the kind of bank that most Russians use to get their pensions, to pay their bills, I mean, I'm sure people use it for other stuff, but that's its main purpose. One EU diplomat expected the Commission to target all Russian banks, including Gazprom Bank. Well, if you do, I mean, obviously these are all unnamed diplomats, so it's just like some people think. But if you do that to Gazprom Bank is the bank through which all purchases of gas have to go. That's what it was set up for. So again, it's another way of if you had any feet left to shoot yourself through, this would be how you would do it. And the idea, of course, is that they're selling you. And I think this is just a marketing campaign, I'll be honest, is the idea that because they have to explain how they're going to collapse the Western economies. So they can't just, I mean, they had COVID, so they collapsed quite a lot of it through that and incidentally set up a police state. Now they're going to, I think they're going to stage 2, which is this. But they just, they couldn't just come out and do it. They need a reason. This is a pageant. This is a drama. This is a morality play. You're living through a script. This is a storyline. And you have to have the children believe the story. This is it. This is all PR. It's why they have such an effective PR operation going on in Kiev. You think Zelensky's in charge of that? No, of course not. She's reading a script. I mean, in between taking copious amounts of cocaine, as far as I can see. But, in his sober moments, he's able to read a script and, he's just sticking to that script. Some countries, such as the Baltics, well, the Baltics isn't a country, but anyway, are also pushing for more measures to tackle Russian disinformation operations in the 6th package. Brussels has previously banned Kremlin-backed media outlets, RT and Sputnik. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the BBC is UK backed media outlet. What I've learnt in life is the truth doesn't fear analysis. It doesn't fear it. If you look at the things you're not allowed to talk about in the West, and there's a whole list of them, you'll find that the reason is because they don't bear scrutiny. So that's that. And also they have to try to keep you in an informational bubble, because but at some point you're going to discover that the evil Russians actually won this. But you need a bogeyman. I mean, read 1984. This is you need someone to hate, and you're really gonna need someone to hate as things get worse for you. But your governments and the people they work for despise you so completely that they're pretty sure that you won't work this out, and that you'll just join in the 2-minute hate against today's it's against Putin, against Eurasia. So anyway, let's carry on with this tosh. Blah blah. The more hawkish capitals have suggested several other Russian media outlets should be banned in the EU as well, but nobody cares about any of this, do they? Because of Telegram. Telegram, you can get pretty much anything you want on Telegram. The BBC's redundant. And all of these other packages might be used for Russian propaganda goals. I mean, talking about Russian propaganda, I mean, clearly it's losing the propaganda war in the West. I don't think it really cares about it, to be honest. I think they've given up trying to negotiate with the West because the West has proven itself to be totally unreliable, like trying to deal with a hysterical 13-year-old girl. There's no point. You just got to kind of shut them in their room, wait for them to calm down and just, do what you're going to do. There's no point talking to them. Anyway, that's that. Let's just move on. Germany has, but countries like Germany and Hungary, which rely on Russian energy imports, have been trying to water down the proposals. Yeah, well, I mean, Germany's going to be expected to give up its entire manufacturing base. That's what's happening to Germany. And Hungary is, historically, we have a lot of connections between Hungary and Russia. I mean, the Hungarians are not Slavs, but there are connections which go back quite a long way. So anyway, and also I think that Orban is trying to, he doesn't want to go down in history as the person who flushed his country down the toilet like all the other European countries have done to theirs. Leaders, so-called. But they're not really leaders. They're just sort of night managers at McDonald's, aren't they? They don't own the franchise. Germany has warned of a recession. That's the understatement of the year. If the EU immediately blocks Russian gas and oil, a recession. I'll just interpret that word for you. Starvation. riots in the streets and societal collapse. Recession is just a kind of way of watering that down. But that's what's coming, I think, unless they really change course very, very quickly. And the other thing you have to say, of course, the Russians haven't even started their sanctions yet. But what they're really doing, if they go through with this latest round of nonsense, is stealing Russia's thunder by applying the sanctions to themselves that Russia was was holding back in reserve. How can you see that? How can you not see that this is a planned takedown? Anyway, let's just carry on. Blah blah. There is also, where are we? Yes, Germany is warned of recession. Immediately blocks blah blah. Yes, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen also urged caution. Europe clearly needs to reduce its dependence on Russia with respect to energy, but we need to be careful when we think about a complete European ban, say, on oil imports. Yeah, if you want to eat. Yellen said during a press conference in Washington, she warned an immediate ban on oil by the EU, quote, would have a damaging impact on Europe and other parts of the world. Yeah, that's the understatement of the year. I have to say, I've never read this Politico before, but compared to what you get out, obviously it's got its slant and it has quite a lot of these, missing context and also gaslighting. But generally speaking, I have to say, if you compare it to what I've been reading in The Independent and The Guardian, at least it does contain some facts. Who knew? An oil ban is likely to differentiate between various grades of Russian oil and their method of delivery via shipping or pipelines. There's also discussion ongoing in Brussels about the need for potential transition periods to give EU countries time to prepare for any embargo on oil imports from Russia. Well, how long do they need? I thought everyone in the West was gushing into their cornflakes about green energy. Yeah, right. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? That's what's going to save you. Windmills, solar power. Maybe at some point, but definitely not there yet. Anyway, one EU diplomat. So far, they haven't named a single diplomat. This is the level of journalism. Said they expected the next sanctions package to be presented in EU countries as soon as Monday, after which EU ambassadors could discuss it during the week and potentially adopt it by Friday. So, basically, they're going to be busy making things worse for you lot. They don't care about you. You can all starve to death. They'll be fine. In my previous existence and one of my previous jobs, I worked, as I've mentioned several times, in public relations at a sort of international level. And I remember going to, where was it? Geneva. For a particular function, and meeting a lot of, there's a whole political class kind of connected to the United Nations in Geneva, and these people don't live like you. They are basically born into this. Their children go to great schools, they get great educations, they speak 3, 4, 5 languages, whatever it is. They don't get the education that you lot get, nothing like it. They're guaranteed these wonderful salaries. They go from one job to another job. They're basically guaranteed it for life. And not only do they despise you, they're terrified of having anything to do with you. And that's basically the stick that's these organizations hold over these people. As that's why you have total lockstep. And the people that this article's mentioning, I can't remember what their name was. Where's she gone? Ursula von der Leyen. Yeah, she's absolutely typical of this type of person from this sort of political caste. These are your managers. These like in Brave New World, is it Mustafa Mond? It's these types of people. You don't have any influence over these people at all, and their job is to manage you, the great unwashed. And they think you're stupid completely. They despise you, and they're slightly frightened of you. And the last thing that they want is to go from their air-conditioned, plush-carpeted, smiling, waitressed environment to have to do anything, dirty like what you have to do. So the way they see it is that their job is to manage you as they drive you over the cliff. And they basically, I think that it boils down to the fact that if you didn't deserve it, you'd have worked it out by now. I think that's kind of how it works. Because you are so stupid and so gullible and can be relied upon to fight anybody, like the crabs, trying to get out of the bucket, anybody who tries to help you, that just goes to show that you deserve it fundamentally. I mean, you could argue that they have a point, really. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to make a few more videos until it gets too tedious for words. Let's just carry on. Blah, blah. However, others were more cautious, urging that there be no formal decision on timing from the European Commission just yet, even though they all expect some kind of initiative early in the week. Yeah, I'll bet. Next week is a reasonable time to get the proposals, one senior EU diplomat said. None of these diplomats have been named. Oh, good, it's finished. Right, well, that's the end of that then. I mean, I haven't been pressing the button so much today. I just felt a little bit more sort of discursive. I don't know how long, if people watch any of these to the end. Most people, I think, if you look, you can see, if you have a YouTube channel, it shows you the average watch time, it's like 37 seconds or whatever it is. I know I make long, boring videos, but I make them to entertain myself, because if I didn't get some sort of amusement from this, I wouldn't bother at all. Anyway, that's it for today. I'll put a link to this article. I think you can call it an article. I don't think you can call it just total propaganda. Has some facts in it. Of course, they don't name any of the diplomats, and I mean, from a propaganda point of view, what I like about it is much more terse. At least it hasn't got any of that sort of narrative bloat that you get with somebody like, what's her name, Belle True, which is just like a bad Pasternak novel in translation. Anyway, that's it. Going to leave it there. That's all for now.